We were just finishing up this problem when the last video stopped, so I was going to have you go to the top and write it, but I decided to put it on another sheet of paper just because I didn't want to be smashed up there to the top. So this is where we were at when the last video stopped, and I'm not sure. Okay, there we go. So remember what our main goal is here. We're on number 5, page 3 of the 7.1 notes, just FYI. So in order to solve for x, we need x isolated. So at the end of the last video, I was telling you that we need to move this over. What I notice, and you're probably thinking, why didn't she just write the two cases? Well, these aren't like terms and they can't be combined because one's a radical and one's not. So when you notice that they're not like terms, you still do the opposite and you just bring this other number over and put it in front. And like I was saying on the last video, we usually have the radical terms second because we're going to be learning quadratic formula. So you'll see that that's the form they leave it in. One thing you should notice is that they both have the same denominator. So when I go to write them, I can write it like this. So remember to do the opposite. That's the first thing. Then if you see they're not like terms, I can't add 3 and 3 radical 5. Just tuck that up and plus in front of the plus or minus, making sure you do the opposite. Then if you notice they have a common denominator, then you can rewrite it like this. So now we're ready for our two solutions. First solution is -3 plus 3 radical 5 over 2. And our second solution is -3 minus 3 radical 5 over 2. And again, we were allowed to write it as a single fraction because they had a common denominator. If they didn't have a common denominator, you either have to write them as two separate fractions or find a common denominator so you could write them as one. So that is the end of number 5, and we're ready to move to the last page of our packet. So let's go ahead and turn to page 4, or last page of this section, I should say. Wishful thinking into the packet, right? I've only made 82 videos so far, and I'm 1/4 of the way done, so there's still a lot more to go. Okay, so solve by completing the square. And remember what I said, when you're taking your test, you need to make sure and read those directions because I am having you turn in your work and 3 of the 5 points are using the method that is asked for. So completing the square, remember, means making a perfect square trinomial. So these next two are going to be a little more rigorous. Do you see why? Leading coefficient not 1, leading coefficient not 1. So step 1, if you look back at the steps, step 1 is divide both sides by a, which is the leading coefficient, to make it 1. So every single term all the way along needs to be divided by 7. Both sides, every term. Why? Because we need our leading coefficient to be 1 in order to complete the square. So now we have 1x squared minus 2/7 x minus 4/7 equals 0. Then step 2, if you look back at the steps, are x's on the left, constants on the right. So anything with an x stays left, anything that has no x moves to the right. So that means add 4/7, add 4/7, and we get x squared minus 2/7 x plus blank, because remember this creates a 0, and that's where we're going to add in our new term to make this a perfect square trinomial. And then whatever we do to the right, we have to do to the left. So we get 4/7 plus blank. Okay, I'm going to shut my office door real fast. My dog is snoring. She knows it's time to eat dinner, so she snores extra loud to remind me. Okay, so we learned in the last video to find this constant, we do half. And remember how I said write it down as many times as you can, so you remember it. Half of b and then square it. And it's all done on the calculator, so we don't really care if this is a fraction, to be honest. Doesn't matter because it's all going to be done in the calculator. So this is our b. So we do half of -2/7 and then square it. So I can already tell it's going to be 1/49. I'll show you on the calculator too, but see how the 2's are canceling? So you get -1/7. Well, -1/7 times -1/7 is positive 1/49. Go ahead and get your calculators out and type that in and see if you get the same number. So we have, type it just like you see it, parentheses, 1 fraction bar 2, parentheses, -2 fraction bar 7, close the parentheses, close the big parentheses. Whoopsie daisy. Kimberly. Okay. Oh, we did have parentheses there. I thought I forgot the parentheses at the beginning. They just weren't showing. I got them. Okay. Thought I was slipping there. Boom. 149, just like we predicted. So just type it. Make sure you write it correctly. And if you're sure you've written it correctly, then you just type it exactly like you see it. And so 1/49 it is. Now we get to use our new factoring technique. So let's take another color, and we have to do the square root of this. We have to do this sign, and we have to do the square root of this. So that's going to leave us with x minus 1/7 quantity squared, because remember it's really x minus 1/7 times x minus 1/7, but rather than write that step, just go straight to here. So square root of the first term, use that sign, square root of the last term, and then it's quantity squared, because this would really be x minus 1/7 times x minus 1/7 if I factored it. On the other side, we need to, whoa, jeepers, getting angry with the calculator. On the other side, we need to type in this 4 fraction bar 7 plus 1 fraction bar 49, and we get 29/49. Almost done, folks. We're almost there, but see how easy we made even the ugliest problem just by knowing how to use the calculator. So now we have a squared quantity equals a number, which we learned on page 1 of our packet. That means to take the square root of both sides, and don't forget to immediately jump down and add your plus or minus so you don't forget it. You'll miss 8 problems on your test if you forget the plus or minus. Anytime you square root both sides, automatically add a plus or minus. So those two undo each other. 2 of something comes out as 1. So we have x minus 1/7 equals plus or minus, and those don't have anything in common. So let's split them up. Square root of 29 we can't touch, but what's the square root of 49? 7. So 2 7s in the denominator come out as a single 7. So do you see how this one's exactly like the last one we just finished at the beginning of the video? We have a number here, which is not a like term with that. So do the same thing I just showed you on that last video or on that last problem. Add 1/7 to get the x isolated because we don't want anything over on this side except x. So we get x equals, again, see the common denominator? So I can write it as a single fraction, 1 plus or minus radical 29 all over 7. So we don't take room for the next problem. Let's go ahead and put our solution sets up here. And yes, all your answers should be in solution sets. The rule is if you have 2 or more solutions, they should be in solution sets or extraneous solutions. So solution 1, 1 plus radical 29 over 7. And solution number 2, 1 minus radical 29 over 7. And there we go, as ugly as it may be. Okay, 3 more. It looks like we're going to need 1 more video after this, but then we'll be done with this first lesson. Okay, so 1 more ugly one. I would say, since you've seen 2 ugly ones in a row, you should shut off your video right now and try to do this one on your own. Like I said, this is a very, very common problem in 150, so I would definitely make sure you know how to do it. So go ahead and shut it off, try 7, and then turn it back on, and we'll check it together. So step 1, make your leading coefficient 1. So now we have x squared minus 7/2 x plus 1/2. 0 divided by anything is 0. So there's my new problem. Now my leading coefficient is 1. So now I know that I'm ready to start completing the square. So after you get the leading coefficient 1, then you move all constants to the other side so you can create your blanks. So now I have x squared minus 7/2 x plus blank, because this is going to go away, equals negative 1/2 plus blank. So write your formula that you need, half of b squared, and plug in so that you can do it on the calculator. So half of negative 7/2 quantity. So close that, close your main parenthesis, then hit squared. So that's what we're going to type in our calculator to get our, what did they call it in that first section? In, yes. So we're going to do parentheses 1 fraction bar 2, parentheses again, negative 7 fraction bar 2, close the negative 7/2, and then close the overall parentheses. So see if you've written it correctly. You just type it like you see it. And then x squared, and we get 3 1/16. Ooh, remember how we said we don't want mixed number. Couldn't think of that for a second. So we hit second ABC, because if you look at that key, it says mixed number to fraction right above it. So that's why we hit the second, and it tells us it's 49/16. So we're going to add that to both slots. 49/16, 49/16. So now we're ready to factor the left side using our new little method. So square root, use this sign, square root, and it's quantity squared. So square root of x squared is x minus